حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وقال الله تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون وقال تعالى يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبعث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به وأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله تعالى وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار ثم أما بعد. So Benjamin Franklin is credited with saying, in this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes, which is a quote you may have heard sometime in your life. It's a very popular quote. And as Muslims, we certainly agree with the first part, right? There's nothing certain except death. In Surah Al-Imran, Allah tells us, Kullu nafsin da'iqatul maut, right? We know that every soul will taste death. And we know that death is coming for us all. But the second part, that nothing is certain except taxes, that's not a fact of life, right? I beg to disagree with all due respect with Mr. Franklin. But there is one thing, aside from death, that is also certain in our lives, and that's change. Change comes in many ways. Ways we perceive as good, ways we may perceive as not as good. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells in Surah Al-Baqarah that He will test us, right? Allah tells us that He will test us with a bit of fear and hunger and loss and wealth and lives and fruit, right? Allah will test us with all of these things, right? The wealth that we often take for granted, right? The fact that we have food to eat, right? Allah will test us with this. He'll test us with loss of life. And remember that ayah, because we'll come back to it later, inshallah. But Allah makes it very clear that this life is not something that's a constant state of steadiness, right? There will be ups and there will definitely be downs as well. And sometimes good things happen. Sometimes we lose things. And sometimes we have to leave a place of comfort to somewhere new. Or sometimes we have to accept a new and lasting change in our life. And all of this is on par for the dunya, right? This is the course of this dunya. But as humans, change is oftentimes inherently stressful for us, right? Internally, whenever we face change inside us, we feel very stressed because we are creatures of comfort in general. And when that changes, right, it can really give us anxiety. We can get very worried. It can mess up our normal flow of what we're used to. And as people, as humans, we often look for certainty, right, so we can plan. So we check the weather on our phones, on the TV, before we go outside to know, should I bring a jacket? Should I bring an umbrella? Oftentimes, we check the gender of a baby that we may be having in the womb, right? So we can know, should we paint the nursery blue or should we paint it pink, right? Despite, everything that's uncertain in our lives, we try to maintain this certainty. But Allah Azza wa Jal has made this life with the constancy of change, despite how well we try to plan. So for today's khutbah, I want to talk a little bit about change, about life, what our deen tells us about change, and then some tips that we can use to weather the storm of change. So if we look at the tapestry of our lives, we see that change is really inherent to it. We're always in the process of change. As we get older, our mindset changes, right? When we're young, we're often focused on playing and having fun. Then we enter our teens, we start focusing on our education. In our 20s, we start focusing on finding a career. Once we have a career, inshallah, then we're focusing on, getting married, having children, making that one of our priorities. Then we start focusing on our health, maybe changing our diet, doing all these kind of different things, right? Even what we desire changes, right? When we're kids, we want the latest toys, the latest phones. Then we get older, we start looking at cars, maybe we start looking at different kinds of things we can do in our house to make it look better. We start looking at, things that we wouldn't have even cared about when we were younger, right? And this is the kind of change that is normal, right? It's the normal change that we expect as we get older. And this kind of change is expected, but it doesn't always make it easy, right? For example, when someone's about to have a child, right? They knew for 9 months, right, that this child was coming, right? It's not a big surprise, but still, when the child comes, the new change can be very stressful. It's a good thing, right, alhamdulillah, to have a child, but it still can be stressful even if you expect this change. But it's also changes that may be unexpected, right? Losing a job, having to move to a new town, someone close to us passed away, failing an exam. When these kind of things happen, that's when we have to be extra ready, right? Extra capable to handle them. And when these tough changes happen, oftentimes we feel like we're lost in a storm, right? Sometimes this dunya, this world, feels like a tornado. So if you know a bit about tornadoes, right, they appear to spin wildly out of control. But right in the center, there's this calmness and this serenity, right, what they call the eye of the storm. And that's like the dunya, right? All around us, there's change and unpredictability. Even when we think we have a plan and we think our lives are going a certain way, there's just 1 second, 1 minute, something can happen, and that whole plan is completely shattered. Right? As a family member of mine says, man proposes and God disposes. So some people, right, they get swept up in this tornado of change, right? They can't control themselves. They get swept up in this storm, they lose their minds, they get anxious, they get depressed. They're not able to tolerate this uncertainty that's really just part and parcel of life. But we, as Muslims, right, we should have a calm, that same calm at the center of a tornado. We should have that in the tornado of the life that's around us. And that calm, that core, that's our faith, right? That's our Islam. And that faith should be the rock in our lives, right? That's the rock that's there that we turn to in times of difficulty and even in times of good, right? It's a place of refuge, a place of safety, and it's the way that we can weather the storms of life. And if you think about it, right, a tornado, when we look at it, it seems completely out of control, right? It's swirling everywhere and taking up houses and all these things and causing a lot of chaos. But it actually has a very defined shape, and scientists who study it can actually predict kind of where it's going and the path and stuff like that. And this dunya is just like that as well, right? We don't see the patterns, we don't see the kind of plan behind it, but we know that Allah has that plan. And we trust in Allah that He is the best of planners. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells us in the Quran, right, that indeed, Allah alone has knowledge of the hour, and He sends down the rain, and He knows what's in the wombs. And no soul perceives what it will earn tomorrow, and no soul perceives in what land it will die. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. So Allah is telling us, right, He's the only one who knows the hour. He knows when the rain will come. How many times do we look at the forecast, we think rain's going to come, and it doesn't come, right? We, as humans, we can predict the best we can, but only Allah knows for certainty when that will happen. He knows, when we have a child, will it be a boy or a girl? Will the child be born safely or not? What the path of that child's life will be? Allah knows if we'll have a job tomorrow, right? If we have a place to go to tomorrow for housing, right? Allah also knows where we will die, right? We have no idea. We can plan the best. We can buy a grave. We can, have our whole family situated in a certain area. And then we may go on vacation overseas and die over there and be buried completely far away, right? We have no idea what's going to happen to us, but Allah knows. And that's the trust that we have to have in Allah that helps us weather the change that's going on in our lives. So may Allah make us among those who have that kind of faith that can weather us through the roughest of storms, and by giving us this unshakable faith that Allah knows and decrees what is best for us throughout our lives. Allahumma ameen. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين واستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. So in the stories of the prophets, right, which Allah tells us so much about in the Quran, all the various prophets we learn about, we have the role models of how to face change in our lives. So look at Ayub, alayhi salam, right? Allah granted him a family. He granted him so many blessings, right? Wealth and kids and all of these things. But then they were all taken away. Yet he remained patient through these challenges and used his faith to weather the storm of change. Look at Prophet Yusuf, alayhi salam, right? He was brought up in a loving family, but then he was abandoned by his brothers. Then he was taken in by people he didn't know. Then he was accused of a crime that he didn't do. He was imprisoned. He was neglected. And yet he remained patient, right? He used his faith to weather the storm of change. Yunus, alayhi salam, right? He was stuck in the belly of this big fish, right? For most of us, that would be the end, right? We would think, okay, we're done. That's the end of our life. But he remained patient, right? And he used his faith to weather the storm of change. And of course, all the prophets, Adam, Yaqub, Musa, Ibrahim, alayhi salam, and of course the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? They all went through challenges. They all went through many, many changes in their lives. But their faith in Allah, right, their tawakkul, allowed them to weather the storm of their changes in their lives. And that's how we should be as well. And as humans, right, we often fear change. We get set in our ways, our daily routines. Think about little kids, for example, right? They have a set routine. Any of us who have kids or nieces or nephews or maybe are teachers or have been with kids for any small amount of time, we know that they have a very set routine in their lives. They get up, right? Maybe they go brush their teeth, eat breakfast, play a certain game, then go have some lunch, go outside, do something else, eat dinner, and sleep, right? And then rinse and repeat every day, right? And that's their routine. If something messes with that routine, then they often have a tantrum, and they scream and cry and yell, and it's all because they can't process how to deal with that change. So as we grow, right, as we mature, we're able to have more mature ways of dealing with that change, right? We're able to comprehend that we're going through a change. We don't start having tantrums all the time. We're able to find different ways to cope with that change, but it doesn't make it easy, right? And many of us, we still fear that change, and that's normal. But that's why some people stay in a terrible job, right? Or some people maintain friendships with people who are no good for them, who are terrible for them, because they're scared of letting go. And maybe they even stay in toxic marriages, which may be abusive, right? Because the fear of change is just too much. But sometimes we need change, and it makes us grow, and it makes us improve. For example, look at reverts, right? It's very hard to go against the religion of your forefathers. You're brought up as a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Christian or an atheist or whatever it may be. And that's part and parcel of your life, right? All the cultures and the holidays and the food and all this stuff is intertwined with that upbringing, that religious upbringing. So to go against that and tell your family, I can't eat this food anymore, it's not halal, right? I can't go to the church anymore, I have to go to the masjid and pray, right? I can't keep the cross up on the wall, I have to take it down. I can't dress this way, I have to wear a hijab. All these kinds of things, these are huge changes that really impact all facets of life for reverts. And those of us who may be reverts for longer, we may remember that, but we may have got used to this new lifestyle, right, of being Muslim. Those of us who are born Muslim, we may not even realize what a big change that is because you were brought up with this being the norm. But those of us who are newer reverts, right, you can just put yourself in their shoes and imagine what a huge change that is. But I think we can all agree that no matter how tough that change is, that's a change that's worth it beyond words, no matter how difficult it is. And there's some things we have to keep in mind, right, as we face change. First, we have to realize that change will occur in our lives whether we want it to or not. So our health, it'll change as we age, right? We have no control over that. We can do exercise, eat the best we can, and get enough sleep and all of this stuff. But at some point, our health will change. Those around us will age and get older, right? Some may pass away. The world around us is changing. Look at climate change, right? Look how hot it is outside today, how the fires that have been going on around the world, all this stuff from climate change. Look at COVID, how much that has changed. Look at the political climate as well, right? How antagonistic both sides are in this world. Things are very different today than they were even 10 years ago. So once we realize that change is there, once we know that we see that change, we have to face it. And I read a good tip on this. Until you make what is subconscious conscious, you will get the same results you've always gotten, and you'll call it fate. So what that means is we have to face change by taking what's deep inside us, right, in our subconscious, and then make it conscious. It's like when you form habits, right? So say, for example, you know you need to exercise, But you come from work and you come from school and you're just used to just sitting on the sofa and putting on the TV and kind of chilling out, right, for an hour or two. So that's our subconscious coming in, right? It's our subconscious habit that just leads us from the door to the sofa, on the TV, and we don't do exercise. So we have to, when we know we need to change, we need to bring that kind of habit out. And we have to change it and rewire ourselves. And then we rewire ourselves to make that the new habit. So, for example, you come home from work and you don't sit on the sofa, right? Maybe take a shower, get a little freshened up, and then do like 10 minutes of exercise and keep doing that day after day after day. At some point, that will be your new subconscious. That'll be your new habit. If you don't do that, then something will feel kind of weird, right? And that's how we want to help adapt to changes in our lives, right? We want to realize that change is going to be there no matter what. And then we have to be able to identify what makes us uncomfortable with that change and then change it. And again, change, is normal, and being uncomfortable with change is also normal. But we have to start making that uncomfortable feeling more comfortable. And we've all been tested with lots of things over the last 2 years especially, right? COVID has completely upended our way of life. We can't visit family like we used to. We can't go places like we used to. Some of us can't even go to work or go to school like we used to. And things, are changing a little bit now compared to like a year ago, but still, things are not the way they used to be. And, we've lost people dear to us, huge changes in our lives, for our community. People, as we can see, have, reacted to this change of COVID and all this different, aspects and all these different facets in many different ways. So some people can tolerate this uncertainty better, and they can see that there are blessings in the time of difficulty. For example, Ramadan, right, 2020, when COVID was at its peak, right, it's a big change. We couldn't come to the masjid. We're so used to having iftar at the masjid, praying Tarawih here all together, and then we couldn't do that. So some people may have got depressed and, been upset that they couldn't go to the masjid, but other people may have seen, I'm having iftar every night with my family. I'm able to lead Tarawih or pray with my family every day for Tarawih. And that was such a blessed time that I took for granted before, that I didn't do it, right? So that's a blessing that, that Allah gives us in times of very difficult change, right? That we can try and look at those blessings. And people who tolerate uncertainty, right? People who are more comfortable with knowing that change is happening and being able to react to that, right? They actually, they know they have tawakkul in Allah, right? And they have lower anxiety, they have better mental health. So it all comes back to, like I mentioned before, having tawakkul in Allah. But there are also those who are faced with uncertainty. When they're faced with change, they end up getting more anxious, right? They fall into negative thoughts, and maybe instead of turning to Allah, they find other places where they can help kind of chill out, right? The news, entertainment, eating, other things that are very temporary, a very fleeting source of comfort. And we've seen this in the pandemic as well, right? Snack consumption has gone up, right? People have reported increasing weight gain. If you look, there's also been increases in criminal activity, right? So there's been a lot of changes as a result of COVID. And we see people adapting to this very uncertain time in very unhealthy ways. So may Allah protect us from that, and may He grant us, healthy and good ways to cope with change. So what are some things that we can do? So first, we have to remember, right, that we can always place our trust in Allah, right? Have tawakkul in Allah. In times of uncertainty, Allah knows what is certain. So by trusting in Him, we can find solace, right? We can find calm and peace in the middle of a difficult time. We also have to realize there are some things that we just cannot control, and we shouldn't let that consume us, right? If we can't control something, then let it go and place it in the trust of Allah. And that's obviously easier said than done, right? Obviously. But it's something that we have to keep in our mind so we can start working on that. We should also try to do things to reduce our anxiety. So there's religious things we can do, of course, right? Reading Quran and dua and dhikr and seeking beneficial knowledge. We can also limit things that bring us down. Negative news stories, people who are backbiting, right? Things like that. We can also focus on things that help bring us calm and see the blessings in our lives, right? Focusing on nature, just going outside and spending some time in a park, looking at the trees and the birds and stuff. We can journal, we can exercise. Things that it doesn't have to necessarily be overtly religious, right? Like reading Quran and things, but things that we can find blessings in our lives and still appreciate Allah and bring calm to ourselves. And we should try to do a combination of all of these things when we are faced with things we can't control to help bring us that calm. And we're not in this alone, right? We have Islam, we have Allah on our side, which is huge beyond what we can even imagine. So we should use our faith to weather the storms of change. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, He tells us in Surah Baqarah, right, going back to the ayah I mentioned before, that He will test us, right, with wealth and loss of fruit and loss of life. But then Allah says after that, after He mentions all the things that He will test us with, Allah tells us, وَالْبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, right? Give good tidings to the patient. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ, those who, when disaster strikes them, قَالُوا إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ راجعون. Those who say, when disaster strikes them, indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to Him we will return. So we need to keep calm, and we need to have patience. If the change involves something we've lost, right? Like a loved one, a person, a pet, whatever it is, something that we've lost, it's fine to take time to grieve, right? But we should also focus on the good things and the constants in our lives to help keep us grounded, our faith, our other family support, and so on. And we should never look back with regret and think that we could have done something to change the situation that we're in. Of course, we have to learn from our mistakes, of course, right? If you messed up somewhere, we didn't study, and we failed a test, and we got left back a grade, of course, that should be a lesson to us, to study harder. But we shouldn't get consumed by regret, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if any adversity comes to you, do not say, if only I had acted in such and such a way, it would have been such and such. But instead, say, Allah has decreed it, and what He willed, He has done. For verily, if opens the way for the work of Satan, right, for the work of Shaitan. And that's in Sahih Muslim. So you can probably tell in your own life as well, right? Something didn't go right the way you wanted to, and you said, oh, maybe if I did this or did that. And then that leads to like a rabbit hole. You start getting spiraling into, depression, and all these other thoughts start coming in, and you start thinking bad about yourself, and that's how people can fall into depression, right? And then fall into a kind of a dark place they can't come out of sometimes without help. So we should try and nip that in the bud, right? If something happens that, we didn't expect, that's an adversity, don't say if I did this and did that, right? If you saw, you made a mistake, correct that mistake and move forward from that, and then focus on the future. And also think about why it happened, right? Know that, Allah may be testing us. There may be a blessing in it that we don't see. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells us, right, in Surah Baqarah, that perhaps you hate a thing and it is good for you. And perhaps you love a thing and it is bad for you. And Allah knows while you know not, right? So Allah knows what's good and bad for us. Whether we realize it or not, we have that tawakkul in Him. No matter what happens, we can weather that storm of change with that belief. And then finally, we have to process the change, right? Let go of any regret, consider why this may happen, and then move forward. And many of us may have heard the British saying, right? Keep calm and carry on. And that's what we have to do. But we have to keep calm and carry on with a purpose, right? With tawakkul in Allah. And we know that our patience in these tough times will be rewarded, right? With Allah's mercy. And these are just some tips in this limited time we have today that may offer us some benefit. May Allah grant benefit to us all. Ameen. So may Allah allow us all to have the kind of faith that gives us comfort in the fact and in the times of uncertainty. May He allow us all to have Islam as our rock, right? And use our tawakkul as our rock to weather the storms of change in our lives. May He allow us all to have full tawakkul in Him. May He grant safety to all of the brothers and sisters suffering around the globe. And we can just turn on the news and you can see they're living in times of uncertainty and change that we can't even imagine. So may Allah grant them all safety, and may He make it a means for them to enter Jannatul Firdaus without account. And may He grant us all Jannatul Firdaus without account as well. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma inna asaluka jannah. Allahumma ajirna minan nar. Allahumma inna asaluka jannah. Allahumma ajirna minan nar. Allahumma inna asaluka jannah. Allahumma ajirna minan nar. Ya muqallibal qulub, thabbit qulubana ala dinik. Ya muqallibal qulub, thabbit qulubana ala dinik. Ya muqallibal qulub, thabbit qulubana ala dinik. Rabbi zidna ilma. Rabbi zidna ilma. Rabbi zidna ilma. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Wa aqimus salah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Please make sure lines are straight, gaps are closed. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله